How you guys doing today? It's Anthony Ganji. Welcome to another episode of Tear Talk. Guys, today we're going to do a follow-up video on the Robert Brooks incident that occurred at Marcy Correctional Facility in New York. Today, what we're going to do is we're going to talk about the duty to intervene. The last episode we did was the aftermath. We showed the video, and then we showcased how an incident like this affects the profession as a whole. I wanted people to be reminded that we have professionals that do their job the correct way, and they are also affected by what happened to Robert Brooks. Now, granted, after I posted a video, I got flooded with comments of people who bastardized the profession because maybe in their mind it's hard to separate the profession from the rogue individuals who did this to Robert Brooks, but I understand why they did it. So I let the comments remain on my channel. They were just emotional. But with that said, today, I just want to do a video that kind of reminds people of two things. One, the importance to intervene, especially if you're an officer. And the second is the human reaction. I read every comment that came my way, and I think the biggest concern outside of what they did to Robert Brooks was that nobody intervened. I mean, not even just on a professional level, like I'm an officer, it's my job to intervene, but rather on a human level. Because what was happening to Robert Brooks was extremely hard to watch, and to know that there were 13 individuals, 13 officers and one nurse who did not respond to stop it, whether it was the duty to intervene, the professional side, or whether it was the fact that this is a human being and what are we doing to him. And I think today with my guest, Russ Hamilton, because we talked about this before we decided to do the show about, let's discuss the duty to intervene, the professional side, what's expected, kind of connects to your role as an officer, the liability behind it all. But then also, but even just being human, the higher power behind it all. And I think that is what is extremely disturbing, because when you don't see anybody preventing it or anybody stopping it from happening, the problem is for people that look beyond the profession and they look at the people in that room not doing nothing, they don't see those officers as human, because they don't see what would be a natural human response to do what's good and protect that individual. So let me go ahead and just quickly read the breakdown of the incident. I'm not going to showcase the video again. I've done it already. If you guys didn't get a chance, please check out the video we did a couple of days ago with Joe Paponio. But just a reminder of the incident on December 9, 2024, Marcy Correctional Facility, New York. Robert Brooks, a 43-year-old man serving a 12-year sentence for first-degree assault, was subjected to a fatal beating by multiple correctional officers. Brooks, who had been transferred from Mohawk Correctional Facility earlier that day, was handcuffed with his hands behind his back during the incident. Body camera footage released by the New York Attorney General's office shows officers repeatedly punching and kicking Brooks as he sat restrained on a medical examination table. The assault included officers striking him with a shoe, yanking his neck, and removing his clothing while he lay motionless and bloodied. Brooks was declared dead the following day, December 10th, at a local hospital. A preliminary autopsy report indicated that the cause of death was asphyxia due to compression of the neck. So in response to the incident, 13 correctional officers and a nurse have been suspended without pay, with termination proceedings initiated, and one officer has resigned. The FBI and the New York Attorney General's office are conducting investigations into the incident. We have a little bit to cover today, but let me bring on Russ. Hey, Russ, what's going on, brother?
Hey there, Anthony. How's it going, sir?
Good. Do you mind introducing yourself to our audience?
Sure. My name is Russ Hamilton. I'm a former and now retired sergeant from California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation. I'm also a former senior juvenile correctional officer, and I'm currently the founder of Keepers of Chaos on Facebook. That's chaos with a K, where basically, we cater and provide training and history and knowledge and content towards everybody that's in the great profession of corrections. I'm also often found here on Tear Talk.
Yes, and guys, remember when I did the show last week and again this week, I'm separating the profession from the rogue individuals, because I work with professionals who do their job every day, and obviously these rogue individuals are not a reflection of who we are and what we do. But with that said, that is my disclaimer. I stick to it. I've worked in the profession for 22 years. But I want also people to know that no way in hell am I going to agree with the actions done by these 13 officers? And then, unfortunately, the response from the nurse. But real quick, Russ, I just wanted to get your insight. You saw the video multiple times. I mean, what was your initial impression when you saw the video? What were some of your concerns when you saw the video?
So, the first thing that strikes me is that this video is really alien towards everything that I've ever expected or seen in corrections, and it was just not something I was like trying to understand what it was that they were doing, because it was clearly not so much a case of excessive force as it was completely unnecessary force. The force being used didn't appear to be in response to anything that he was doing, and then the scope and the scale of it, with the number of individuals involved, was unlike anything that I've ever been involved with. And I just I hearken back towards some of the youngsters that I've trained along the way. One in particular recently, just a couple of years ago, where I was talking, and this young man was going on into police work and not corrections. But I was telling him, I said, here's the thing, and this was in preparation for his oral interview, is that you don't get to pick who the perpetrators are, and you don't get to pick who the victims are either. You have to protect the rights of the individuals, regardless of their function and regardless of the way that you encounter them. Now, necessarily, that means that oftentimes we do end up using force to save somebody, to save ourselves, to prevent an escape, what have you. But you don't get to just decide who's guilty and who's not guilty, and who you can, arbitrarily mistreat, abuse a person's civil rights, and act, in direct contradiction towards what your oath is. The reason that we have anything such as an oath is to provide us with clarity as to what the right thing is to do in any given moment. And that's where everything that I've ever seen broke down in this video. And it broke down from the oath. It broke down from other people failing to intervene. And apparently, it broke down all the way towards this individual losing his life. And so that's something that we have to be cognizant of, is that duty. That duty is found within the bounds of that oath that we take at the beginning of our career. And if we're not serious about that oath, anything and everything that we do then becomes subjective and possibly outside the law. And that's why I think that this particular video is going to be really important.
Yes, and that's why I kind of want to put this video together, because again, when I got the comments, I want people to be clear that there's no effort from this profession to support those actions. And I think now, after I felt that me and Joe Paponio did what we could about the aftermath and letting people know how we as professionals feel about this, because we are not in agreement with what happened. Now I think this is a great video to discuss the importance of that duty to intervene, but also the more troubling thing where, hey, we're human. Why are we not reacting naturally and trying to put a stop at it? Now, if I was management at this facility, if I first saw the video, I would be awed. I would be disgusted. And the first thing I would do is come after all my supervisors that were on that scene, because the supervisors are given the authority to correct what needs to be done immediately. They're given the authority of what would be expected of absolute compliance from anyone who decided to go rogue. If I'm a supervisor and I put an end to it immediately, my job is to put an end to that and then definitely hold that person responsible. But what to me was troubling is when you see the supervisors as involved as those other officers. To me, that's a cultural concern. If I was management, I would have such a concern about the culture because of what the supervisors seem to be allowing to happen and then take part of. I mean, Russ, you were a supervisor on the front line. You were a sergeant. I mean, when you see that you have supervisors on scene there that are not reacting, not trying to do what they can to stop this incident, and then worse, taking part in it, that to me is one of the most disturbing things, because they are trusted in that role to handle the situation as expected, to maintain that trust between us and the public, and to see them not intervene, to see them take part. If I was management, I would literally be destroyed by what I saw on that video.
Yeah, I think that there's two parts to that, at least from my point of view. Is you have the supervisors who, first of all, they're not intervening, and second of all, they're not leading, or at least they're not leading professionally. They may be leading in an unprofessional and an illegal manner. Anyone can be a leader. Hopefully what we do is we have people who are good leaders, those that will step in and do the right thing, regardless of what a supervisor is doing, regardless of what anyone else is doing. So yeah, that's very, very troubling to see that, because they're actually setting the tone and the expectation that what they're doing should be considered to be all right, because they do have that alleged leadership role. They do have that alleged supervisory role. And so that, just goes completely beyond the pale. There should have been someone there at any level who was saying, hey, what the heck? Stop. This guy is, he was not uncompliant to any degree that I could see. He was not a threat in any way, and all of the other things that tick the boxes that would allow us to use force simply weren't there. Once again, that's why, I get back to not just excessive force, but completely unnecessary force. And so why these particular individuals are acting that way and in front of so many other individuals, you can say it, and I feel like I can say this with a lot of confidence in my heart, that the culture there is rotted to the core. And what has been going on in, I don't know if it's department wide or not, in New York, but everyone from line officer all the way to the governor's office has allowed this to fester. And so this is the time where some people with some actual leadership need to step forward and fix this.
Yeah, and Russ, for me in my career, I would always say the duty to intervene was always secondary to what I feel is my human responsibility. I feel that when I joined this profession, I connected the duty of the profession to a greater level of that human responsibility. I mean, that's why a lot of people join first responder professions, because they're motivated by what they feel may be that human responsibility to do good. And the duty to intervene, I think honestly, yes, it does motivate you, because professionally, that's what you're told to do. But most of us don't need to be reminded of our duty to intervene, because we're already motivated from within to do the right thing. And I think what makes it complex is when you have supervisors that are not doing the right thing, or even worse, just encouraging it, because we don't know what was being said at the time. We don't know if these supervisors were even given orders to do this to Robert Brooks. And then you also have senior officers or experienced officers doing it. For anyone who's young in the profession, if they're not motivated by that human responsibility to act, and they're just kind of motivated on that duty to intervene, the problem is the moment the supervisor starts condoning the actions or taking part of it or taking part in it, or the moment the experienced officers are doing the same, this officer becomes extremely confused as to what's right and what's wrong. And it's crazy how it goes from the situation to their immediate peers. I got a book that's coming out with the rookies, and I said, what's right and what's wrong. You got to always remember that you can't let your loyalty to your peers supersede what is right, what you are expected to do within your role as a correctional professional. We always highlight loyalty to your peers, yes, but we also let people know, for the ones that are doing their job, for the ones that are professional, for the ones that take their oath and literally, do the job the way they're trusted to do the job. If I was a supervisor, again, or if I was a manager looking at this, again, going after those supervisors, to me, once the supervisors get involved, that kind of gives okay to everyone else that what we're doing is good, and you can go ahead and either take part, but don't stop. And that, to me, is why the supervisors have to be held at that highest level of accountability. I mean, whether they took part or they allowed it, you're a supervisor, you're on scene, you are responsible for that outcome. What's your thoughts on that, Russ?
Yeah, one of the things about being a supervisor is you try to teach your people to do what you would, what you would do in a situation, to emulate what you would do under any given incident, and in a way that reflects back in a positive light on yourself. What I see in what happened in that video is the exact opposite. It's dropping down to where it's not that the standards are low, it's that the standards simply cease to exist. And so, I think that when you're out there as a supervisor, that should be what your ultimate goal is for your people to reflect your values, to be carrying your words. What they say is exactly what you would say, and so they have the full force and authority, not only of the department behind them, but as you, as their supervisor. And that's when people, are all on the right page, when they're, locked, in lockstep, to be able to carry out some sometimes distasteful duties that we have to get involved in, but still with the full force of, law, policy, and procedure behind us, and not wandering off into some wasteland where we're just doing things because that's what we feel like doing at that moment. This is just, clearly a case of them feeling like, any old emotional way that they want to feel about this individual, that they're justified, that they can rationalize what they're doing, and that it just becomes, part of the norm. And I don't know how much of that is based on who that department hired versus who that person became due to, lack of good training.
Right. Now, what I want to do first, guys, is I want to do the professional side of things before we get to the higher level human responsibility, which I think is the most troublesome. If you, as I said before, if you look at the comments I got, I mean, people are just shocked that why didn't anybody respond? They didn't say, why didn't any officer respond? These people are saying, why didn't anyone respond? So they no longer see the humanity in what we do, because the way these rogue officers carry themselves out. To a lot of people, even if they expected this from the profession, sadly, because some do, there's a humanity side that they couldn't connect with. It's like, correctional officers, really, you guys could do this as human beings? You guys could do this? So what I want to do today with Russ is first put out the duty to intervene, let you guys know what's expected of us as correctional professionals. I even have a quote from someone that I got from our social media page. And then I want to relate to the higher level human aspect of what's expected of us just in general as human beings. And as I said, I'm just going to reiterate it, a lot of us come into this profession because it already aligns with our greater human responsibility that we feel we want to give back. So first, when it comes to defining the duty to intervene, now this is what's expected of us, kind of in layman terms, but when you work in corrections or any law enforcement, you're pretty much taught that as correctional officers, intervention is a mandated responsibility to prevent harm, ensure inmate safety, and uphold institutional integrity. So this is the legal side, the liability, defining your role. Legal frameworks and policies outline this duty, making it a non-negotiable part of the job. That means that if something is going on and you are witnessing someone being hurt and you make no effort to get involved to prevent or to intervene, you can be held just as responsible as the people that are doing it, because you're held at a higher scale and your job is to intervene to prevent harm happening to others. And the duty to intervene, now this is a quote, the duty to intervene is clearly stated in our policies, but it's more than just a rule. It's about protecting the institution and everyone in it. And that includes officers, civilians, the incarcerated persons. But Russ, what's your thoughts on this aspect of, the defining the duty to intervene, and how important is that? And is that not expressed to us the moment we take this job?
Yeah, I think, when you look at the way that we're trained, when you look at the things that we go through to be able to, achieve and wear the badge, it should go without saying, but in this case, obviously, something happened with each and every one of these individuals. I don't know if it was along the way or that's just the way they were formed, but it's just one of those things where you should know that you have to take action each and every time where you see either the law being broken or that you see someone in some sort of physical peril. And that also goes, of course, for certain things where maybe property is in peril and things like that. But go back to the first two. Obviously, there was unnecessary force being used, and so that's a lot of different laws being broke right there. And then this guy was in peril. He was in peril ultimately of losing his life, which did happen, but also all types of different physical harm being visited upon him. And so with those two things present, is someone should have stepped forward. And I think it is good to talk about the humanity part of it. For me, I kind of go back towards the training part of it, because I feel like training someone up and sensitizing them to what their North Star should be, which encompasses their oath and everything else, is something that I can, teach them. I think the human part of it, I don't know if that's, innate, if it's nature or nurture. I just don't know that if it's possible to teach someone humanity, or if that's something that has to be there from the very start. But either way, there has to be a set of standards. There has to be a set of principles. And hopefully those are backstopped with some sort of recognition of humanity along the way.
Yeah, and by the way, Russ, we're going to explore that, because I have a whole section real quick today on humanity, but I also have something on training and preparedness, which we'll get to briefly. But I want to mention something. Even with the hiring process, you do your best to filter the right people in, but I think the biggest energy must go towards the culture, what you allow and what you tolerate, because the culture, one, will maintain good people, but also if a bad apple sneaks in, that good culture is going to get them out, because that's what we should be doing. So I do think, maintaining a good culture is something that is an active engagement. You have to make sure, because believe it or not, everything in corrections wants you to go towards the negative. So fueling a good culture that upholds these standards is an active effort. and it's active from frontline all the way up to management. You can't just sit back and expect this type of culture to exist. It's active. You got to keep it fueled, because if you don't, it's going to go in the opposite direction. So again, this could be just a culture where they allowed it to fall backwards so far that this is the norm. And the funny thing is, guys, when it goes this far back, and you see people on these cameras that don't even know they're recording, this is a culture that they've accepted. That's sad to say, is they probably don't know any better, because even the people that are walking in is walking into a culture like this. So that's the other problem, is the people that are coming in that may want to do right wind up getting absorbed by the more experienced officers who showcase a culture that is totally not what the corrections profession is about. And I have to say, again, with management, I think they did replace the superintendent. You got to know that a culture like this is happening, because the inmates are going to tell you. The inmates are going to tell you when this happens. So when you start getting those complaints, and those complaints are, really building up, I mean, what are you doing? Are you checking on them? Or are you, making sure that you're operating in a culture that you can stand by and defend, just in case shit hits the fan? And then I got this next part here, Russ, why is it critical to the profession? So intervention preserves professionalism. It prevents escalation, right? I agree. And then and it reflects the integrity of the correctional system. Failure to intervene can lead to misconduct investigations, obviously here, disciplinary action, and facility-wide consequences, or even national consequences. We're talking about ultimately the lack of credibility in who we are and what we do, because it's hard to separate the profession and the professionals from the rogue, because that's all they see, the outside. They see this rogue action, but what they don't see is the good that's also done behind the wall. So I get why the public could be mad, because they're going to be exposed to this and only this. And the quote I got is, by stepping in, and now, mind you, guys, this is the duty to intervene. This is just the professional side. We're going to get to the human responsibility, but think about this from the professional side. By stepping in, we protect not only inmates, but our careers, reputation, and personal reputations, and the reputation of our facility. I would go as far as saying the reputation of the profession, because if it makes national news, look at the end result there. But Russ, what's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, when people look at us, we want them to see us as professionals. We know that we're going to never be cut any slack with regard to that. Because I'll tell you, quite frankly, the number of, false accusations and everything else that come your way in your career are going to be multitudinous in that respect. And so you have to be able to show every step along the way that, hey, no, this is not the type of officer you are, that you are adhering to what your professional code states, that you are adhering to what the law says, that you're adhering to policy and procedure, that you're adhering to case law, and everything else that goes along with that. And if you do that all the time, and you make sure that you are on point, especially with regards to use of force and things like that, the chances of you being questioned, they're not zero. It's never going to be zero. But they're going to understand and see you as that consummate professional, and there's less likely to be any daylight between you and whatever you've put in your report. And I think that that's so important, because let me tell you, along the way in my career, I've had those accusations come my way. I have been investigated. I've had to go before that board and raise my hand and swear to tell the truth, and do things in sometimes situations where I was not happy about it, because I felt that I was, being, unfairly portrayed in the things that were happening. But over the course of a career, if you're going to be active, if you're going to be proactive, and you really truly want to shine, you can't shy away from things just because they're uncomfortable. You can't decide that, hey, you know what, whatever goes, I'm going to justify my actions, whatever it takes. I'm going to rationalize my actions, whatever it takes. And then just expect that, you know, everything that I do is going to be backstopped by some sort of code of silence. And I'm going to ask people to you know, basically step up for me, and I've put them in harm's way, but they don't need to be snitches. I think that everyone should be willing to ride their own heat. I think everybody should be willing to say, hey, no, you know what happened out there? Yeah, go ahead, just, you know, write the report. And you know, these people that just, you know, expect that they're above the law, they're not. And you have to have some kind of reckoning in your own heart where you're able to know that you actually stand up for something, you know, and that's something, you know, happens to be our oath. It happens to be that, you know, our oath is what points us toward that North Star of our feelings, of our convictions, of our philosophy. And, you know, I know that my philosophy is, you know, probably flawed. I know that some people don't agree with the way that I couch some things or the way that I talk about the profession. But still, you know, I'm the one that has to live with myself, and I'm the one, you know, who is trying to, you know, shed some light on this, for other officers. And if you are an officer that's caught up in a rotten culture, you know, your options are basically either to quit or to change it. And I'm going to tell you right now, the hard course is to try and change it, and to be there, and to try and institute a new type of culture where everyone can have everyone's back, and yet everyone will ride their own heat.
Yeah, and guys, when you go in with good, strong moral values, you don't sway, which means that you will be able to affect the culture as opposed to the culture affecting you. Like Russ said, you got to have that North Star because it keeps you steady. When the culture tries to move you in the opposite direction of where you need to be, you're able to stay the course. But when you don't have that North Star and you go in weak, you're going to go wherever that negative culture takes you. I put for the next thing, the peer accountability and chain of command. I think that when you have a culture that has strong peer-to-peer accountability being primary, and then obviously the accountability to the supervisors being the ultimate or the secondary, but ultimately that is the final level of accountability. But the reason why I'm saying that peer-to-peer accountability is the primary is because we kind of work with each other more often than we, you know, work with our supervisors technically to some extent, or our prison management. We owe it to each other first. That's why we do what we do. We tend to have a very strong sense of loyalty to our peers. So peer-to-peer accountability, especially for a good culture, holds people to doing the right thing, which means that when you have a culture that has strong peer-to-peer accountability, you got a culture that supports the effort of doing the right thing. When you have a weak culture that doesn't have peer-to-peer accountability, then it becomes harder for officers to step up and want to do the right thing because they become afraid that they're going to be social outcasts. So again, this is not an excuse. I'm just letting you know what may stop someone from doing the right thing. So with that said, the peer-to-peer accountability, the obligation doesn't just apply to lower ranks. All officers, regardless of seniority, are responsible for holding each other accountable. We are responsible. Now, the quote I have here is intervention isn't about undermining authority. It's about reinforcing the values we all swore to uphold. And I think that, again, with the supervisors especially, you know, you're trusted in that position so you can hold the integrity of what we're trying to accomplish here, you know, what we are trying to push forward, that positive message, the trust that we get from the public. And if you break that, it really is a crazy ripple effect of how much that will destroy the culture. But Russ, what's your thoughts on peer accountability and the chain of command? I really love this quote. Intervention isn't about undermining authority. It's about reinforcing the values we all swore to uphold.
So when I think about pure accountability, is really, where I get back to the part where I think about true leadership roles. One of the things that I think supervisors, management, and admin, maybe not so much supervisors, but well, maybe supervisors, that they do very, very poorly is they fail to develop the leadership capabilities of those that are at the line staff level. If you develop people at the line staff level, who are, right there in that peer-to-peer accountability strata, that's the biggest one available there, and you give them leadership roles, and they are out there, actively helping to build the culture that you want to see instituted. Those are the people that are going to go on to promote and then do the same thing that you've done. And essentially, they're going to clone themselves in a way that's going to make the entire department more stable. Instead, what I tend to see is sort of a, default nepotism. I see people, who, get promoted, who, are not good role models, who aren't good at the peer-to-peer accountability, that aren't people that you would look to in a leadership role. Now they may be looked on as a leader, but that's maybe only because at some point they promote and they have the brass on their collar, or they're the type of leader who is not a positive, pro-professional type. And that's what we want. We want those, pro-professional type of leaders, all along, seated everywhere throughout that strata of the line level staff. And that, that's where I think we could make the biggest inroads and the biggest impact in corrections, because later those people and the people that they've so affected and those people that they have trained will promote upwards. And we need strong people like that, because right now, across America and in many things I see a lot of weakness. I see a lot of people playing politics. I see a lot of rationalization. I see a lot of justification in different things. And instead of having, really good, safe institutions, we're just kind of, rolling with the punches, and we're not actively doing the type of policing that we should be inside of our institutions.
Yeah. Now, guys, when we're talking about duty to intervene, remember, guys, we're talking about what the profession demands. We're not talking about the motivation, the human responsibility, but what the profession demands. So, again, if one person would step up, it could eliminate some level of conformity, groupthink, whatever it is. And
Can I get back to one thing real quick, Anthony? I know that this may not be the experience of a lot of people out there, but I've worked in some, really large, a really large department, and really big compared to most places in the country, institutions. And one of the things that was always, foremost on our minds is, sometimes you have, big incidents or critical incidents, where you've had to use force, or you've been attacked, or sometimes I've been in situations where we had, multiple staff members attacked. And, when we're there and, having to cuff up the guy and do all kinds of things, there was, I won't say every time, but most times there was a conscious effort on our part to kind of tap the individual who's there and had to handcuff them out if they've been in a big struggle, if they've been attacked or whatever, and let them know, hey, we got this guy, and get that person, out away from the area where they can recover and they can get back to their normal self, so that it doesn't become an issue later in the incident. Now, I'm not saying that that's what happened in this incident, because it clearly wasn't. But I would say that, in many situations, I've seen staff do incredible jobs at self-policing and, and disengaging and helping, get things tamped down and back to normal quickly by intervening. And it's not that they're stopping the crime; they're stopping the incident from continuing and getting out of hand, because sometimes you're not able to see clearly in an incident, and you don't necessarily always know that it's time to stop yet. But I have seen that in some really good crews and some really good units.
Well, that's kind of so that's where I wanted to mention the training and preparedness before we go into the human side. This is the last area of the duty to intervene. And I put that officers are trained to recognize when intervention is necessary and how to act in a way that ensures safety for all involved. But I got a good quote here too. It's not just about knowing when to step in. It's about being prepared to do it decisively and professionally. And I think that to me is key. You know what the funny thing is if somebody would have just stepped up with some authority and protected this inmate, the light on the profession could be a bit different, because now that one good hero would have been something that we could have looked at and said, that's us. That's who we are. And we could have stood on that hero as a way to say, yo, guys, this is what we're about. And you would have, people in this profession that would be able to say, you know what, even though you had these individuals that did this, who we are is that person right here. And right now we have no one that we could point to in that incident that did anything correct. No one that had the courage to step up and protect this individual and let alone doing it decisively and professionally. I want people to know when there's an incident like this that happens, it's not to minimize what was done, but hear me out. It takes courage in that moment to stand up and act decisively to protect that person that's being harmed. And what we could have done is if somebody would have stepped up and did the right thing, the whole profession could have stepped up together and supported that individual, because we know for a fact that that individual would have been challenged by everyone at that facility. And what we could have done was we could have reinforced what that individual did, because that is truly the definition of who we are. But unfortunately, we don't have that. Unfortunately, all we have are these 13 officers that went rogue, the nurse that doesn't represent nursing and corrections well either. And what we're left to do is kind of let people believe that there's someone that would have done the right thing. And that's what makes this discussion so hard, because we don't have someone in the moment that we could point to. Rather, we have to create somebody in the hopes that the public believes that there would be someone who's a professional like us that would have decisively intervened. That is a bit frustrating. But Russ, what's your thoughts? Because there's definitely a lot there.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much that we could look at. If I just look at, from training and preparedness, I think that I've, said enough about that. I have seen a couple of people online, and I don't think it, represents the whole profession. At least, not my experience in it. That they're talking about. Well, that was just an inmate, or they've said, that these people were in the right or partially in the right. And I just have to ask myself, in what world are they living in, that they think that we are somehow always in the right. Clearly we aren't, and we can't allow that to fester. And we have to know that that even if we believed we were in the right, that how do I put this? I would say that the cost, we cost someone their life, which should be antithetical toward us, at least on a personal and professional level. Then one step up from that, we're having 14 or 15 people lose their careers, and I'm not trying to equate that, but it is a cost of the whole thing that was there. Then above and beyond that, we have the public losing confidence in what's going on in our correctional systems. And I'll tell you right now, corrections is so complex and hard to do that people are always going to be questioning it. There's never going to be a time that comes along where everything is going to be considered optimum and okie dokie. I'll guarantee that, because just the nature of the beast and stopping and preventing crime, and whether or not we give out long sentences, or whether we try and do rehabilitation and reentry for people, it's there's no apparent single answer toward what we do. So it's just a lot to bite off. And I'll say this right now too, is that thank you, Tear Talk, thank you, Anthony Ganji, for giving people like me a chance to get in here and discuss this. Because I'd be willing to say there is a lot of people who aren't willing to discuss this at all.
Well, thank you, because you know what? Can I be honest with you, Russ? I don't expect sometimes the public to understand this effort, but I do expect us to understand this effort. I hope the public aligns. I hope they align with us, and then they can see what we're trying to do. Because to be honest with you, if it's funny, because when the profession looks at us, the videos, especially during times like this, they want to look at our experience before they relate to the advice that we are trying to give. Public's just the opposite. They want to see us as humans first, and then we bring that into the profession. So if you get the public to recognize who we are, and they could see that, well, these two people, man, they seem to be pretty good individuals. Maybe we're a little bit wrong about what is expected, at least at first in corrections, let alone what people will do. But I think that's why this channel matters. I think we give a balance of, one, the profession, so we get the respect from those with experience, but also, we teach the right thing. We're very connected to the human element, and I do think that some of the people that follow us that aren't in the corrections profession relate to that connection first. I have the human. I wanted to go over this real quick too. I have the human responsibility, doing what's right beyond the uniform. For me, that's my main motivator. The duty to intervene, it exists only through this, because this is what has always pushed me. This is what aligns me to the profession. So I thought we could speed through a couple of things here, because I think this is the greatest shock when people from the outside are looking at this video. I mean, yes, some will generalize it to that's the profession and that's who we breed. Where for us, when I look at it, you just happen to have 14 evil individuals in that area at that point, and they don't represent the profession. So I'm seeing them as individuals, and the public may be seeing them as correctional professionals. So the first thing I want to mention is sometimes intervention isn't driven by policy or obligation. It's a gut reaction to seeing something unjust or harmful. And the quote I have is, long before we became officers, we were human beings. That instinct to step in when something feels wrong exists beyond the badge. And I think when people see these individuals do this, they think that the culture of corrections removes the humanity from these individuals. I really believe that's what they see. I believe that they see these officers that go rogue, and when they blame the profession, they basically say that this is what the profession turns us into, that this is the culture that we live and breathe. And it's not. It's actually the culture that we're constantly fighting against. And that's kind of why I wanted to create this video as well, is that for people that are managing these facilities, it's easier for a facility to fall into that, what you saw on the video. And our job is to make sure it doesn't happen. And that's the very intentional effort. But Russ, what's your thoughts? I like that quote, Russ, right? Long before we became officers, we were human beings. And that instinct to step in when something feels wrong exists beyond the badge.
Yeah, it really does. The thing about this part of it right now for me is, like, I have about a million tangents that I want to spin off and spin off into at this point. But what I'll say is this: is that everyone out there, ask yourself when the last time was that you saw something happening that was wrong, that you stepped in and actually did something about it. When was the last time that you did that? Or maybe more appropriately, when was the last time that you saw something wrong and you decided, nah, I'm not going to get involved? And what was your justification? What was your rationale for not getting involved? What was the excuse that you made so that you didn't have to put in the effort? And I think that that's something we need all to ask of ourselves, because you know what? There are a lot of people out there that just won't do a damn thing, regardless of what the situation is. Are you comfortable with yourself? Can you definitively state that if you saw something that you would do something about it? For me, that's an affirmative yes, because I probably get involved in too much stuff. And if you guys knew how much stuff that was, well, maybe save that for another day. So if you're not willing to, get involved, and you watch a video like this, maybe you shouldn't be saying anything about it. But then on the other hand, if you are the kind of person who would get involved, if you can say, hey, if I was there, things would have been different, then maybe you can say something about this video. I'm unequivocal in my condemnation of what happened there, because I think that the profession that we serve is needed, because the public, by and large, is not equipped to deal with more chaos out there on the streets, as it were. And that's what we prevent. We keep chaos contained within a very small area, and we deal with it every day. And I think that people should be sensitive to that and understand that this profession is not an easy one. But no matter how hard this profession is, no matter how difficult it is, no matter the dirtiness of it, the dangerousness of it, nothing can justify what those individuals did. And so I'll get off my high horse now and turn it back to him.
No, Ross, wait, what you said was extremely powerful for people in the profession looking in. A lot of people will say the profession can turn them into these individuals. And we always say, well, that's if you allow it, because it's an intentional effort to stay focused on who you need to be. But you're right. You want to go ahead and say, well, we did this because the profession made us that. We expect the public to feel sorry for you. They're not, because you're not going to use the profession as an excuse for what you did. And to me, I feel sometimes that happens. I feel sometimes, people tend to use the profession as an excuse, but also sends a negative, perspective out there to the public. And we go back and say, yeah, this profession, it's tough, but you have to be tougher. It's that simple, and I could talk from experience. I have not had an easy career, and neither is Russ. So we're not someone that are talking from facilities that are cakewalks. I mean, we're talking from very active facilities, and we see the worst of the worst. But if the profession hits you one way, then you got to hit back another way. But once you start accepting that this is what it is, and this is who you become, and then you fall into this, and then you want to blame the profession for making you that, bullshit. And now I'll get off my high horse. I'm glad you said that, Russ, because we've said it before, and we said it again. But I like when you say those thoughts, because I think I think when the people watch this channel, they respect us in different areas of expertise. They do. They got Russ as the tough tactical guy who you want, behind your back when shit hits the fan. But when Russ is able to say this side, he's going to get that tough tactical individual to agree with him a lot more than I would, because Russ has had his hands dirty, but always remained professional. And with that said, it's good for Russ to also take note, because Russ has had a very challenging career, that, you know, we have to take accountability of our actions. And I've always said on my side, intentionality. You're worth it. If you're going to sit there and passively go through this profession, it could destroy you. But that's your fault to some extent. Because, as I said, we've all gone through stuff, and look at us. We make it out. If the profession's tough, then we got to be tougher. And for people that may not want to hear this, because maybe they're used to the excuses, it doesn't get you anywhere. It just doesn't get you anywhere. It doesn't. If someone was to utilize this as an excuse, who's going to feel sorry for you? You know, and then the other thing is also the policy. Policies go through all these changes, as I mentioned in the show, because the people that do the wrong thing try to utilize policy as a way to get out of being in trouble. And it bastardizes the policies that we're implementing, because they find these lawyers that find loopholes when it's like, hey, guys, what you did had nothing to do with policy and procedure. Nothing. You went rogue. So don't lean on policy and procedure as a way to say that you weren't doing any of that. Now I got two more things here, Russ, that I wanted to just go over real quick. This is my favorite quote coming up out of everything we read. But the real quick little blurb I got is the human reaction. I'm sorry. When policy and humanity align. In most cases, professional duty and personal morality intersect. So they reinforce each other. And I agree with that. As I said, my motivation for this profession aligns very well with what I believe the profession demands from me. So when people try to say that this is not what the profession's about, I strongly disagree, just like Russ would, because I connected to this profession for the right reasons. So when you attack the profession to some level, you're attacking me, because I do align with what those expectations are. And I know what those expectations are. But I love this quote, and this quote is for the professionals in the field. The best officers are those who see the uniform as an extension of their values and not a mask that hides them. Russ, how powerful is that?
I would say, you know, that's the point that intersects where we have to see value in what we do. You know, I'm troubled at what some people might think are, you know, some silly things that I hear other alleged professionals talking about, or people outside the profession that denigrate what we do. You know, one of the things that I sometimes hear from our own are when they talk about us as being babysitters, you know, and I think that, you know, just the idea that we are only sitters, that we're not providing value to the public, that we're not providing value to each other, that we're not providing some sort of value, even whether they want to admit it or not, the inmates, you know, is really, you know, a misguided and warped view as to what we do. You know, I long ago lost, you know, count of the number of, you know, inmates that I saved from a perilous situation and got there because they were receiving some kind of beating, or they were being stabbed, or they were being, you know, punked, or whatever else, you know, came along. And then the public, you know, doesn't see us until things like this happen, right? And so then their immediate thing is well, you know, what is actually going on in the prisons? And then they tend to be the ones that tend to vote for the type of politician that wants to remove all of accountability from corrections, not at our professional level, but from the inmates, so that the inmates can get away with anything. And it just makes for a really, really bad mix. So, you know, ultimately, it really is that intersection of what we perceive our value to the profession, our value to the public, our value to the inmates, and our value to each other. That's really the important thing. I've been in there, with a lot of my past partners, things and situations that I was just, so glad that they had my back, and I believe that they were happy that I had their back. Too many of them to name right here, and that camaraderie and that fulfillment and the idea that we meant something to each other, even if only in that moment, because I didn't get along with everybody, but to the public as well, who the public should know that they sleep better at night because we keep that chaos so well confined. And then inmates are, sometimes they don't recognize even what we do. But I've had ones, come up and thank me, sometimes long years after an incident where, me and my crew being there made the difference in them making it off that yard. So you have to be able to find value in what you do, even if the public doesn't often recognize you, even if your own peers don't often recognize you, even if the department doesn't recognize you, but somehow you're able to eke out and face that man or woman in the mirror and know that you've done something good with yourself, good with your career, and good for that day.
Russ, the last thing, we'll piggyback on what you just said, the personal cost of inaction. So this is more of just to the people who, again, if you're coming into this profession with strong morals or strong values, you can never let that shift, because the moment it shifts, it will cloud your judgment, the judgment that you may need. You need to be decisive on these incidences that require you to act, and you don't want your morals or your values, the things that are going to motivate you, to be swayed, because that's going to make you hesitant. And I have here, failing to intervene can leave lasting emotional and psychological consequences, even if there are no professional repercussions. And again, for these guys here, they probably thought they weren't going to be caught. So having said that, these guys were just acting horrendous. But the thing is, I want to mention something. We do the right thing because it's the right thing, not because we're afraid of the consequences, because there's consequences sometimes in even doing the right thing. And that consequences could be from your peers who may not see that as being the right thing. I've never seen the right thing as subjective. I connect with the people who believe in the right thing, that what's expected of us. And the last quote I have here for the day, it's not always the things we do that haunt us. Sometimes it's the things we didn't do. So even if you see something happening and you want to put your hands up and say, well, that wasn't me that hit him, it also wasn't you that stopped it. It wasn't you that stopped it either. What's your final thoughts, Russ, before we, I guess we're going to wrap up. What's your final thoughts here, Russ?
Yeah, the thing with, the personal cost of inaction, you have to live with yourself. And, I've seen officers in a couple of situations that I was in, fail to act, fail to respond. And it wasn't in a situation like that. It was in a couple of situations where I could have ended up seriously hurt. And, me and a partner of mine, Kenny, man, I'll never forget, one day where, we were in the thick of it, and it was tense. And some other staff member went and locked themselves in a bathroom. And that person, he knows who he is. He had to live with that, for the rest of his, somewhat shortened and truncated career, and we went out there and did what we had to do, and we were able to live with ourselves because we had each other's back, and fortunately everything turned out well that day. There's no guarantees about safety. There's no guarantees about going home, and sometimes it makes it worse, and hard to swallow and choke down when it's your own side that, you know, is involved in action and leaving you hanging, you know. And you know, that's happened, you know, in really three situations that I've been closely involved with. And me and my partner Kenny, that day we were able, you know, we were lucky to be able to walk away from that. And so in a situation like this, where, you know, all of these people, they were going to go home anyway, you know, but they chose inaction. It wasn't fear, not fear of, you know, getting beat or losing their life. It was just, you know, maybe a fear of, you know, being ostracized, or maybe just, you know, a fear of, you know, not being accepted, which I guess is the same thing. Maybe I'm flailing for words here a little bit, because I'm a little bit, you know, flummoxed just thinking about, you know, some of the things from the past in corrections that I've dealt with. But I think, you know what, you have to at some point find a way to act, find a way to move forward, find a way to stop something, find a way to affect something. And you can't just let, you know, your fears overtake you like that, you know. And you have to just find a way to press forward. You know, I have you know, nothing for these people that were involved in that situation. They all failed horrendously. I can barely even believe it. I have to sometimes reread the story and look at the video, because it doesn't make any sense to me with regards to the other things that I've seen in corrections. And I'm not saying that everything was always, you know, 100% okie dokie, but nothing was ever like that. So, you know, I hope those that are in the profession will anchor themselves into the best culture that they can eke out of things, and find like-minded individuals to structure that with. I hope that the public will know that this is, you know, not what we're about, and that by and large, you know, you have, you know, tens of thousands of good men and women out there working in a very difficult profession, who are not looking for, you know, justification, rationalization, or excuses. They really are trying to do the best that they can do, and sometimes they're going to come up short. I've come up short before, plenty of times. So I would just hope that everyone would take that under advisement. And, you know, if you really want to, you know, impact corrections, if you really think that there is a way to move forward in all this, and you're part of the public, step forward, you know, sign on the dotted line, you know, go through the training, put that badge on, and then we'll see. We'll see if you would act differently, or if you would act the same as those other individuals did. I guess that's about it.
Yeah, and guys, my closing thoughts. I mean, guys, I'd like you to check out the video we did prior. It's a very more. It kind of brings balance to both sides of the discussion, but I think we can move forward on this. Unfortunately, people are going to judge the profession based on what these individuals did, and I get it. But this is our attempt to let you know this isn't what the profession is about. But whether you choose to still believe it is, that's on you. I'm not here so much to go ahead and convince you on a belief that you're not going to change, but rather to kind of keep motivating the professionals to keep doing what they do. That's the key, to keep your head up and, you know, stay the course, regardless of how people may see the profession. We know that's not who we are. We know that doesn't reflect the best of us. But man, if only one person could have stood up, we could have literally leaned on their excellence to define who we are. You know, it just didn't have a hero in the moment, unfortunately. And unfortunately, a life was lost in the process. As always, guys, the show is Teared Up. If you haven't, please subscribe, interact, engage, comment, hit that bell. Bell's going to notify you every time I post a video. Stay safe.